Hi guys, today I'm doing a review that I have meant to get to for a really long time and just for one reason or another haven't gotten around to it, but I'm finally going to be talking about the Penric and Desdemona series of novellas plus one novel by Lois McMaster Bujold, who is one of my all-time favorite authors. I put off reading this series for way too long, mostly because, as I have talked about extensively on this channel, novellas are just not really my thing most of the time, and so I just wasn't sure if I would really enjoy them. I was really wrong about that. I loved this series and it hit a lot of the same beats for me that the Vorkosigan saga did, so that just made me enjoy it even more, really. I think Bujold basically self-published all or most of these, and what I think is really fun about that is that apparently around 2015 she kind of decided to retire, but for her retiring didn't mean that she stopped writing because she still apparently enjoys writing. She just stopped taking any contracts from publishers and she just writes like whatever she feels like and either publishes with the publisher or self-publishes it, so she doesn't have to go on tour, she doesn't have any deadlines, she just kind of does what she wants. So you can tell that, at least to me, you can tell that these novellas were written in that sort of spirit of love and fun with an author that just is writing these because she wants to, she's enjoying it, she kind of explores whatever she wants with it, she's attached to the characters, and she doesn't feel like nobody's telling her necessarily that it has to be a certain way. That's not very important to the series, I just think it's kind of a sweet detail, and to me it kind of makes sense with how the series feels to read. This series is part of her World of Five Gods series, which includes The Curse of Chalion, what's the second one? The Paladin of Souls and The Hallowed Hunt. So the funny thing about that is this was originally called the Chalion series because the first two books, The Curse of Chalion and The Paladin of Souls, are pretty interconnected, but then I think she went and wrote The Hallowed Hunt, which was set like 300 years earlier, and then the Penric and Desdemona series is also set in the same world, and it's really the same setting and like magic system and theological system, I guess I would say, that are shared, but the characters are all different, the settings are different. So yeah, very loosely connected. You do not have to read The Curse of Chalion to read these, although I think in terms of understanding like the gods and how it works, I think it kind of helps, but it's not super related. Basically in this world there are five gods, as you might have guessed from the name of the series. There is the mother, father, daughter, son, and bastard, and they are gods that are real. The characters have sort of interactions or experiences with them, but the gods can really only interact with the world through the humans that they communicate with, basically. This is a really bad explanation, but anyway, a lot of the series, both the Penric and Desdemona novels as well as the three full-length novels, kind of explores the interactions between the gods, the magic, all of this stuff, and how it changes the characters' lives. In this world, characters can become magic users when they come into possession of a demon, which is a chaos elemental that originally comes from the god, the bastard. Once people have the demon inside of them, they can kind of harness some of the demon's power in a controlled way, hopefully, and that allows them to perform what is essentially magic. This gets explored a little bit in the novels from the original series and quite a bit more in the Penric and Desdemona novellas. Similar to what the Vorkosigan saga does with Miles Vorkosigan, the Penric series follows Penric from age 19 well into his 30s. She wrote them mostly in chronological order, but with some jumping around. So in the first novella, Penric's Demon, Penric is 19 years old. He is on his way to his engagement party when he stops to help an old lady who has collapsed by the road and accidentally comes into possession of her demon, which he then names Desdemona. So his life takes a very unexpected turn because he has unexpectedly become a sorcerer and he goes off and things kind of go from there. So over the course of the series, you see Penric go from basically a teenager who has no clue what he's doing with these new powers to a very established sorcerer, scholar, adult. I really love the character of Penric because you just get such a strong sense of him from the very beginning of the first novella. He is the seventh child in a family of very rural nobility, and his family is basically marrying him off to the daughter of a local cheese merchant who he doesn't really have very much to say about this, but he's kind of like generally willing. I mean, she's cute, he's 19, whatever. But he's just a little bit of the odd one out in his family. He also, I think in the first few pages, he's described as really liking to go fishing, not because he wants to catch fish, but he just likes the excuse to get away from everyone and sit in silence. He's kind of, even from the beginning, just kind of a sweet, earnest nerd. And as the series goes on, he is totally the kind of character that just really wants to stop in the middle of an action scene to just like engage in some academic or intellectual discourse about some point that has occurred to him about, theology or magic or something like that. And everyone is like, Penric, we're kind of fighting here. And he's like, oh, sorry, my bad. The counterbalance to Penric is his demon, Desdemona, who is a chaos elemental, but for a demon, she is very old. I think she has had 10 lifetimes, so he kind of gets the echoes of her previous, they're called riders, but the 10 women, they were all women, who she belonged to before she belongs to him. So he kind of has the experience of these 10 women with very varied careers and lives. There was one who was a courtesan, a couple of them were physicians, and he just has all these experiences. And then Desdemona, being a chaos elemental, is sort of a lot more impulsive and aggressive and just a lot of characteristics. So she's kind of like a foil to Penric, who is more the kind of character that really wants to stay at home with his books, but kind of gets sucked into things. I do see some similarities between Miles Verkosigan and Penric. I think actually like the personalities of the characters are the biggest differences, honestly. They go through kind of similar life arcs where they start out at a young age, kind of trying to figure themselves out, prove themselves, and then they gradually get to the point where they've accomplished more and more of the life milestones that they are looking for. They both have kind of a romance arc that takes up a portion of the series and eventually gets resolved happily. I don't want to give too many spoilers on that, but I did find it, I would say, equally satisfying in both series, even though I felt like I could kind of tell there were some similar things about how Bujold told that love story, but I think both kind of worked. So I have a list here of the novellas in the series because I don't think I can remember. Actually, I probably could remember all of them, but I don't want to test that. So the first one is Penric's Demon, which is really just an intro to Penric, to the world, to Desdemona, and how it all works. And then the second one is Penric and the Shaman, which honestly I think is actually one of the weaker ones. I found there was a little bit too much rehash of the first one. I feel like she hadn't quite figured out how to write about Penric and Desdemona, and there's just like a lot of explaining of what happened in novella number one, but I still enjoyed it. That one is also the one that made me actually decide to go and read the Hallowed Hunt, because there's this other magical element to the world of shamanic magic, where the shamans basically take on the spirit of these great beasts, and then they can also kind of do some magic stuff, but it's different than what the sorcerers can do. So I thought that was interesting. I don't think The Hallowed Hunt is the strongest novel out of all of them. But anyway, so that one was okay. Penric's Fox, which I think she actually wrote later, but is set immediately after Penric and the Shaman, which I really enjoyed. Those three kind of form the first arc of the series, where Penric is still quite young. Then, chronologically, the next one is Masquerade and Lodi, which I also thought wasn't the strongest, but it pairs kind of well with the very latest one in the series. So I don't think you necessarily need to read that one in chronological order. I think generally for the series, publication order is fine. Chronological order is also okay. I did kind of a mix by accident because I kept looking at series lists that had different orders listed. Then I feel like there's another arc that's about 3 novellas. So that's Penric's Mission, Mira's Last Dance, and Prisoner of Limnos. Really loved all 3 of those. In these, Penric is around age 30. There are some really important events in his life, kind of traumatic ones, that happen in between the novellas that you kind of gradually find out about in backstory, where basically Penric had an experience where he tried to basically go into medicine and ended up having some real mental health issues around that, and that gets kind of explored throughout the series in a really powerful way, I think. But this is also the part of the series where we get to see a lot of new locations, new characters, the romantic arc kind of gets introduced. I really enjoyed these. And then after that arc is resolved, we have Orphans of Raspay and Physicians of Vilnoc. I really loved both of those. Physicians of Vilnoc was written, I think, shortly before 2020, and it does involve an outbreak of plague, which was a little bit hard to read at first, but eventually it got to somewhere that I could kind of get through. So really enjoyed those. And then the last one is actually a novel, although it feels more like a novella that just got like a little bit long, and that's Assassins of Thasalon. So I think that's 10. Did I count right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, that's 10 books total. Most of them are novellas, so they're pretty short. With those 10, the series could be complete as is, or she could decide to write more. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I adored reading this series, and I found it super comforting as well. There was something kind of familiar and lovely about it, and the similarities with the Varkosigan saga, but I also just really loved the characters in their own right, and she is really good at just like bringing to life these characters that you care about so much. I think the biggest downside of this series, if I had to say there was one, I very rarely felt any serious concern that anything truly bad was going to happen to Penric. He's a very powerful character with his abilities. You don't really go through the series concerned that he's going to die or suffer serious injury or anything like that. Like, you always kind of feel like he's going to be okay, which is both comforting and also takes away from the tension. But a lot of the tension in the series actually comes from not whether Penric is going to make it out of a given situation, but whether he's going to be able to help the people around him, or just how he's going to overcome the situation creatively, because he has a lot of powers, but he also has a lot of limitations on the powers, and the limitations are kind of more interesting than the actual abilities. But usually what happens is that he sort of, for one reason or another, cannot just brute force himself out of a situation, so he needs to find a creative way to get out of it. I feel like there's so much more I could talk about with this series in terms of some of the ideas that get developed and the different things that happen in different books, but that would start getting into spoilers and also just get really, really long. So I hope that this review has given you some sort of feeling for what the series might be like, and if you might be interested in it. I think if you haven't read any Bujold ever, I don't know that I would start here. I still kind of feel like Curse of Chalion would be a better place to start before going into the Penric series. So maybe try reading that. I think if you like other Bujold and you haven't read this because, like me, you thought you didn't want to read novellas or you just weren't really aware of it, you should definitely check these out. I listened to the audiobooks. I thought they were really quite good. It's done by the same narrator that did the audiobooks for the Varkosigan saga. So I just found that this series made me really, really happy. It's one of those things where it's not that it's perfect, but it was just kind of perfect for me and what I was looking for when I was reading it. And I definitely think that this is a series that I'll be revisiting and rereading in the future. So yeah, it has kind of become a new favorite for me. And I just love the fact that Bujold is self-publishing and just clearly having a blast writing about these characters. And you can tell how much, as the author, she's attached to them, which, you know, that can become a problem, I guess, from a storytelling perspective sometimes, but really didn't bother me. I hope she keeps writing this series, but I guess if she doesn't, she'll probably, hopefully, write something else that I like. Let me know if you've read any of this series or if you're thinking about reading it. Let me know if there are any questions you have about it that I didn't talk about in this video. I was trying to keep it fairly broad and spoiler-free, so let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.